Hey, Ronnie here. Just finished up my FEC project. Our YouTube clone is what we've been working on. I specifically had the basically the details on the video in the comment section of YouTube, or what we call a YouTube. Just a quick, um, just for the sake of context, quick visual of what we've put together. The reason that I wanted to share this is really just to say that this is set up so that the user can subscribe, and that information is posted to a database. So the subscribe persists, for instance, when I refresh. Same if I were to post a comment. I won't do that for now. But really the point that I wanted to share is that I've got a lot of data going going back and forth here. I'm gonna stop sharing now. And that presented a special challenge, I would say, for me as I went from environment to environment. So I was obviously focused on developing locally initially, and so I just got after it, started trying to get things to work on my own machine, and concurrently was developing tests. And very quickly I realized that in order to get tests to run the way that I wanted them to run, there were certain things that needed to happen in the tests that I didn't want in my development code, or wouldn't want ultimately in my production code. For instance, the interaction with a database needed to be with a test database rather than a development or production database. And so at that point, I started leveraging environment variables to signify when to do one thing, when the environment is a test environment, another thing when it's dev. And so that was a big learning for me, but unfortunately that learning didn't persist in the sense that I eventually moved into deployment mode, sort of a pre-production environment, if you will. And in trying to make sure that I got things to work the way that I wanted to get them to work, I didn't do things conditionally based on an environment variable, for instance. And so while I got things working the way that I wanted them to in my pre-production environment, my deployed environment, I ultimately then broke things that kept me from running tests or making tweaks locally to see how they work. They worked. So that was a big time drain for me, because if I did want to make little tweaks and see how they worked, let's say, for instance, I'm making a change to some CSS and I just want to see how it impacts the rendering of my app. I was actually having to go in to my app code, make the CSS adjustments, deploy on AWS, and then refresh and see if I got the result that I wanted. So I really just wanted to share that learning, that what I did for my local development versus test environment, sort of condition using conditions based on environment to modify my application. That's something that in the future I'll be much more conscious to do throughout sort of the life cycle of my application, and really from the very beginning have an eye toward deployment and production, so that the code that I'm writing doesn't just work locally, or doesn't just work once it's deployed, but can work throughout the life cycle. So that's what I wanted to share. Thanks a lot. Take care.